Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. It is my great pleasure to rise and speak on the Interactive Gambling Amendment Bill 2016, and I do want to commend those opposite who've joined with the government in supporting this very important bill before the House today. Mr Deputy Speaker, on the 7th of September 2015, the government commissioned a review to examine the impacts of illegal offshore wagering in Australia, and the bill implements key parts of the government response to the review. It was led by the Honourable Barry O'Farrell, and I have to say he has done a superb job, and I do commend Barry O'Farrell for the very comprehensive work he has done in this space. And while we do, of course, have bipartisanship on this particular bill before the parliament, it should be noted that we did not see this sort of action from members opposite when they were last in power. So, again, like so many other issues, Mr Deputy Speaker, we are very proud to lead the way on this important social reform. On the 28th of April 2016, the government released its response to the review, and it agreed to 18 of the 19 recommendations, including measures to clarify the legality of services and to strengthen the enforcement provisions under the Interactive Gambling Act. In responding to the review, the Australian government said it would do 4 things: crack down on illegal offshore gambling providers, which, as we know, is becoming more and more of an issue with their insidious activities, which are largely unregulated. Clarify the law by prohibiting click-to-call in-play wagering services to respect the original intent of the Interactive Gambling Act, not expand the online betting market in Australia by legalising in-play betting, and to establish a strong national consumer protection framework. So the bill is the first stage of the government's response to implement the government's response to the review, addressing the first 2 parts that I mentioned. Part 3 doesn't require any further action, of course, and very proudly, Mr Deputy Speaker, we have announced that a national consumer protection framework has been agreed to by state and territory gambling ministers on the 25th of November last year, led by the Minister for Human Services. Can I say, and we're looking at some of the headlines just in my local papers, Mr Deputy Speaker, 2.2 billion gambled in Geelong. Pokies take $50 billion in Victoria. This is from the Geelong Advertiser, the 1st of August 2016. In my wonderful region, the city of Greater Geelong was 4th on the list of municipalities losing the most, behind Monash, Brimbank and Greater Dandenong. So this is a considerable issue in my electorate of Corangamite. Even in Colac, poker machine losses have swollen in the last year to $7.7 million. And we understand and we know that gambling is an addiction which affects so many families. Gambling is a social curse for many families, where it runs rampant and it causes enormous issues with family breakdown, with financial hardship. There are so many stories that all of us have heard about families losing their homes, losing their livelihoods, getting caught up in illegal activity, trying to repay their gambling debts, and of course causing enormous damage to the family unit. So, of course, while online wagering is only a small part of the overall gambling market, it is Australia's fastest growing segment. The review found that the number of active online wagering accounts in Australia has grown 4-fold during the period 2004 to 2014, from 200,000 to 800,000 online wagering accounts. So many people have more than one account. Legal online wagering is growing due to increases in mobile devices and changes in consumer behaviour. And we have heard from the previous speaker the concern about television advertising, and I do think that this is a legitimate point. With mobile devices in our lap, watching the TV, and the prevalence of more and more television advertising, it's all too easy to click or to push on a particular app and to make a decision that may be absolutely end in trauma or end in absolute hardship for that person and for that family. The market is highly competitive. It largely consists of internationally owned companies licensed and operating in Australia. The review found that estimated gambling expenditure by Australians on illegal offshore sites is between 64 million and 400 million per annum. So today I'm very proud, of course, that the Interactive Gambling Amendment Bill will crack down on illegal offshore gambling. It will amend the Interactive Gambling Act to introduce a range of measures, including amending the law to make it clear that it is illegal for overseas gambling companies to offer gambling products to Australians unless the person or company holds a licence under the law of an Australian state or territory. It empowers the Australian Communications and Media Authority, ACMA, with new civil penalties, complementing the existing criminal penalties powers held by the Australian Federal Police, and it allows ACMA to be responsible for the entire complaint handling process from receipt through to enforcement. It introduces other disruption measures to curb illegal offshore gambling activity, such as placing company directors or principals of offending gambling companies on the movement alert list so that any travel to Australia can be disrupted. It empowers ACMA to notify international regulators of operators providing illegal or unlicensed interactive gambling services. It creates a register of eligible regulated interactive gambling services in order to raise awareness among Australian customers of interactive gambling services that should be avoided, as evidenced by their non-inclusion on the register. Currently, Mr Deputy Speaker, the Interactive Gambling Act prohibits online in-play betting on a sporting event, such as Aussie Rules, and let's not forget to mention the wonderful Geelong footy team, football, rugby league, cricket or tennis, but it allows in-play betting wholly by way of voice calls made using a standard telephone service. Some gambling providers have contravened the original intention of the Act by using click-to-call technology, allowing individuals to place in-play bets by selecting their bet online, either through an app or the website, and confirming the bet by placing the call through to the gambling provider. The bill before the House today clarifies the law by prohibiting click-to-call in-play betting services to respect the original intent of the Interactive Gambling Act. The government does not intend to further expand the online betting market in Australia by legalising online in-play betting. And as I mentioned at the beginning of my contribution, Mr Deputy Speaker, we are also moving very, very strongly to put in place stronger consumer protections. Now, this is not dealt with in relation to this bill, but it is a key element of the government's response, and I do commend the Minister for Human Services, Minister Tudge, for his work in leading the way to make sure that consumers of gambling products are properly protected, that they are put on notice, that they are given the appropriate warnings, and we know how much of an issue this is for our children. So the government's, following on from the bill, the government's next step is to implement the recommendations in the review to work with the states and territories to establish a strong national consumer protection framework. That, of course, was reached in principle on the 25th of November 2016. Mr Deputy Speaker, this is yet another example of how the Turnbull government is supporting families. The reaction to the bill has been extremely positive. I think, as I've mentioned, we've seen very important bipartisanship across the chamber today on this important measure, but it is disappointing, Mr Deputy Speaker, that it took a Liberal national government to implement these important reforms. In so many respects, we've seen in the parliament that we are fixing up Labor's mess, and it is regrettable that this hasn't been dealt with earlier. But let's not dwell on Labor's failures in this respect. Let's, of course, be positive and obviously reflect on the fact that we are seeing strong bipartisanship. And, we take our responsibilities in this space very, very importantly. Our work on e-safety for children on the internet is incredibly important. Our e-Safety Commissioner commenced on the 1st of July 2015. We have a very effective complaint system backed by legislation to get harmful material targeted at Australian children down as fast as possible from large social media sites. So again, Mr Deputy Speaker, when it comes to the safety of our children, who more and more at a younger and younger age are using the internet, are going on websites, are accessing apps through their phones, through their tablets, we take the safety of our children extremely seriously. They are more and more vulnerable to being exploited online, and we're very proud of the work that we've done in relation to the work of the e-Safety Commissioner and the legislation that surrounds that. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, it's well known that the minimal enforcement of the Interactive Gambling Act to date has been a key reason why many illegal offshore operators have been providing services into Australia. This bill sends a clear message, Mr Deputy Speaker, to overseas operators and to regulators that Australia is serious about compliance with its online gambling laws. It is serious about ensuring that we will not let international companies come in. We will not allow them to come into Australia and to exploit children, to exploit families illegally. And as you can see from the breadth of this bill and what's encompassed in the bill, there are many ways in which we are tackling the seriousness with which we take these particular amendments. Australia has, unfortunately, Mr Deputy Speaker, been a grey market when it comes to gambling laws. A number of major offshore gambling operators have made the most of this. But when I reflect on the sorts of amendments that we are putting to the House today, even putting some of these directors of companies on the movement alert list, they now know, Mr Deputy Speaker, that they're not able to come into this country when they're operating illegally. So we are now seeing already a number of major offshore gambling operators who have indicated that they will cease their services. Some have already indicated have stopped already providing those services, and some will withdraw their services once this bill has passed the House. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, I urge members on the other side to obviously move as quickly as possible to pass this bill in the House of Representatives and then, of course, in the Senate, so we can get on with providing good government and ensuring that when it comes to families and children, that they are properly protected and that the laws of our great country are complied with.